It's hard to come up with illustrations sometimes for all the things I need, like illustrations for sermons and illustrations for my newspaper article and illustrations for these videos. Today was one of those days. I didn't know how to describe what the sermon was going to be about without telling you what the sermon was about. And if I told you what the sermon was about, then you would have no reason to show up because you'd already have the information. But as I went home for lunch, I got my illustration. I was sitting at a red light on Kensington waiting for the light to turn green, and when it turned green, I didn't pull out. Every good motorcyclist knows that you never pull out just because the light turned green. You always make sure everyone around you sees that they have a red light. And it was a good thing I did, because as I waited and looked around, here came this great big delivery van. And he was doing about 60, 70 kilometers an hour, and he blew right through that red light. Had I just pulled out when my light turned green, he would have slammed right into my driver's door. There was not a chance he was stopping. I laid on the horn. I was really angry. I started to chase him down. I was going to tell him what I thought of his driving. And then I thought, well, that's not the best idea. People around town know who I am. That may not look very good. So I just went home. Guess who was sitting at the Shell gas station at the bottom of the hill when I came back after lunch? My van driver. So I spun around and went and had a chat with him. And he apologized up and down. He was on his phone. Didn't even see the light. So I reminded him there was a school nearby. I reminded him he would have just about killed me had I pulled out. He apologized some more. That incident reminded me that even though you think you're safe, you're not always safe. Even though you've done all the right things and you've got the green light, doesn't mean you should just go. Sometimes there are dangers you don't know about, dangers you don't see, dangers you don't think about, but you ought to. That is exactly what the Apostle Paul is going to tell the Christians this week. He writes to the church in Ephesus, and he wants them to know that they can't just assume everything is safe and easy. They can't just assume that everything is going to be comfortable. In fact, once they start doing that, they're going to be in big trouble. Paul has some help for them. Paul has something he wants them to do to make themselves stronger and to make themselves more aware. The thing he asks them to do is something that I think a lot of us neglect. And we neglect it to our own peril. So because we often neglect it and don't really take it seriously, the sermon title is called Necessary, Not Optional. We're going to talk about some things that I think most Christians believe are optional, but they are not. These things are necessary. And I'll give you a good illustration and a good reason why we need to think a little bit differently. That's this Sunday. In our Bible study last week, we were in 1 Kings chapter 21, and it was a great discussion because it's a discussion about a man who struggles with jealousy, a man who struggles with immaturity, a man who uses his power incorrectly, a man who does not see his life correctly at all, a person who forgets that he's there to serve others. Story of Ahab in 1 Kings 21 was so good. And we talked about so many things. We only made it 7 verses last week. We only got 7 verses in. So we're essentially going to start at the beginning again and just review what we did last week, talk a little bit about some of the issues that came up, and then carry on because there's just as much to talk about in the remaining 22 verses. This is a great discussion. This is a great little part of 1 Kings because it's super applicable to us. All of us deal with jealousy. All of us need to see our lives correctly. All of us have to think about how we use our positions of power. Every one of us needs to think about how we treat people. We can learn some great lessons in this little chapter. So, I'm looking forward to Sunday morning. I'm looking forward to the great discussions we will have. I'm looking forward to your reaction to the sermon, because I think it's going to be very, very helpful. Just remember, be safe out there. Watch for the other driver. Take care of yourself. I sure want to see you Sunday morning.